Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inside HR. This week in association with our friends at Thomas International. I'm James Marsh, and together we're going to be revealing the secret to solving the skills shortage in your business by hiring for potential. 75% of companies struggling with recruitment attribute this to a skills shortage right now. In a world riddled with uncertainty, psychological science can inform hiring decisions, helping businesses navigate skills scarcity. Over the next hour, we're going to explore how you can reliably predict a candidate's potential for success by using science to diversify the talent pool and manage complexity. We're going to discuss what really predicts success in a role, what science reveals about future performance, the root causes of current recruitment challenges, and practical solutions for your recruitment challenges in your business right now. So if your business is looking for alternate ways to hire during the current skills shortage, then this webinar is for you. Don't forget that you can take part two using the tabs you can see underneath the slide deck image on your screen there. You can vote in our polls, you can give us feedback, and you can ask questions, which I'm going to put to our guest experts, whom I'll introduce you to in just a moment, and you can see on the right-hand side of your screen right now. You'll also see underneath your screen an attachments tab, which this week includes links to some great blogs and resources, including a download on recruiting for potential, a couple of blogs about why aptitude is the secret to beating the labor shortage, what the labor shortage means for recruitment right now. And there's also info about how you can get in touch with Thomas to continue the conversation about your specific recruitment needs as well. And as always, for more fantastic content on recruitment, talent, HR, and more, you can visit HRreview.co.uk. So let me introduce you to my guests this morning. First up, we have Jason Darby. He's the Director of Science at Thomas International. He leads their science department, which is formed by their psychology, data science, and content experience teams. Together, the science team apply their technical expertise to enhance the product experience of Thomas International software. Jason is an organizational psychologist by training with a deep interest in applied psychology across the talent management lifecycle. He's been a guest on Inside HR before, so it's a pleasure to welcome him back. Jason, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning and good day to everyone, whether you're here live or you're watching at some point in the future. Thank you again for the opportunity. It's going to be a really fun topic, and delighted to have Jos here as well, because I'm going to talk a lot about psychological best practice and how we can predict potential. Then you're going to hear about a company that is doing best practice to an absolute T. It's one of the best case studies I've heard in a long time. So really looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting session.
Brilliant. Well, let me introduce Jos as well. Jos has formerly played professional basketball at a top international level and has held leadership positions at a variety of top talent and coaching firms. He co-founded Creatment, which is what we're going to talk about today, in 2016 to bridge the skills gap in the technology industry. It's great to have him as part of our team this morning, making his Inside HR debut. Jos, welcome. How are you doing this morning?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's been a while since I played basketball, actually.
It's wonderful to have you with us, and I'm sure that experience has informed what you've gone on to do as well. And we'll talk a lot about Creatment later on, which I'm really excited to get into with you. We're going to start, as we often do on Inside HR, with a poll. So we're gonna launch this right now, and we're going to ask. We know that businesses, it says on the screen right now, we know businesses are facing a range of hiring challenges at the moment. We've talked about a skills shortage on Inside HR for the last for a little while now. Let us know the most pressing issue you're currently facing in your organization. Is it A, a low volume of candidates overall? Is it B, candidates lacking the skills you need in your business? Is it C, losing people midway through the process, which we know can be a challenge? Is it D, difficulty managing high volumes of candidates? Or is it something else? And if it is something else, perhaps you can use the questions tab to let us know what that something is, and we'll hopefully be able to bring that into the discussion with Jason and with Jos over the next hour or so. So we're going to leave that running for a while. Please do get involved, because that will inform our discussion as we go through. Jason, let's get cracking then. Let's talk a little bit about, as we like to do on Inside HR, let's sort of set the scene first. We've talked a lot about a skills shortage on Inside HR over the last year or so. We know, obviously, the pandemic has changed the way businesses have had to look at talent and recruitment over the last couple of years as well. So tell us a little bit about the situation. Then we're going to get into a little bit about what we mean by potential and hiring for potential as well. But talk to us about the sort of overall landscape at the moment.
Some of the things that we're seeing at the moment, they're trends that we were seeing before the pandemic, but they seem to have become even keener pain points and issues. One is around candidates just not having the skills that companies are currently looking for. And part of this comes with the nature of the world of work is changing so rapidly. So in the introduction, it was mentioned I manage a team of data scientists. People that are working as data scientists now or analysts and working with this sort of information is a relatively new field. It isn't the most common pathway for people through the education system. So people are in jobs today that they probably didn't even know existed 15, 20 years ago. The type of work that we have in businesses today is rapidly changing and the demands are changing. So we hear a lot from a lot of our clients around reskilling as well. Candidates don't have the skills they need off the bat to join their organization, but then the jobs that they thought were pretty standard have changed. If you think about marketing as a field has evolved and grown massively over time. So people who may have entered marketing have then had to adapt around more digital technology trends in the field, how they deliver information, how they communicate. So even if you feel as though an industry or job role hasn't changed that much, what the job looks like day to day has been evolving massively as technology has been moving ahead. So we see that one of the biggest challenges is people not having the skills when they first apply for a role, but then once they're in the role, they need to keep acquiring and learning new skills or adapting them to new situations. And that's why the focus of today is talking about potential. And we're going to go into a little bit more about what we mean with potential, but quite often trying to find somebody that's the whole package right away that fits every requirement you may have for a role is becoming increasingly hard to do. So customers are increasingly speaking to us to say, how can we use psychological science to find characteristics and aspects of a person that we know will help them be successful, even if they don't have the skills that we need today?
And is it fair to say, you said that there are roles now that didn't exist or we couldn't even imagine 10, 15 years ago. It's fair to say that that's going to continue. There are going to be roles in 10 to 15 years' time that don't exist now. So in a way, looking at it in this way is going to sort of future-proof your recruitment as well.
Yes, I mean, if there's anyone that's listening today that works in social media marketing or anything like that, it didn't exist until social media became something there. Did recruiters recruit through social media? These areas have all changed and introduced, and now we just take them as standard because it's part of our day-to-day life. But these roles will continue changing, and it will vary based on industry. But if you think about job levels as well, the requirements for managers and leaders are changing. The expectation that managers and leaders will be good coaches for the people they support is increasing and increasing. So you may have an excellent operational manager that needs to learn more coaching skills or softer skills. You may have somebody who is extremely technically gifted, but the software they're working on changes. So I have the pleasure of working with our software engineers almost every day, and they're often speaking about the fact that they're fantastic developers, but then the technology that they work in, the code they have to learn, is constantly changing as new coding languages are developed or evolving. So it feels like across many different industries and job families, how you do the job is changing so much that there is a sense of lifelong career learning is almost an ongoing challenge now, that businesses are saying, how do we identify what the skills gaps are if it's a moving target? How do we bring people in that can keep following those moving needs? And what do we need to do to equip people to be able to keep learning once they join a business?
No, it's really interesting, and we're going to start talking about potential as being the solution to that, being able to assess potential. I guess, Jason, it's probably worth first looking at what we mean by the word potential, because it can cover all manner of things, can't it?
Yes, it does. So typically, I started this question. So for everyone listening, if you know you may have just met me, hearing me on this webinar, and I said you have great potential, you may be thinking, thanks, Jason, but for what? Because you need to have potential for something, to do something to a high standard, or to have some sort of outstanding performance in a particular area. If somebody said to me I had great potential as a psychologist, I'd be chuffed because that's what my career is in. If somebody I had great potential as a dancer, I would go, I do not, because I have absolutely no rhythm. It isn't related to what my personal goals are. So you can have potential in some areas that are more relevant to what you're hoping to achieve or not. But people can also have potential that you might not realize. You may have somebody, and we're going to hear a bit of this from Jos, where somebody may have had a career as a dancer, but they've got high potential for something else. And so when we talk about what is potential, we're often looking at psychological factors that help people have the potential to do things like, can you learn new information quickly? Do you have the potential to learn quickly, absorb new information, apply it into new situations or scenarios? Do you have the potential to adapt to changes in your environment? Are you the sort of person that is able to quickly pivot as things in the world around you are changing? Do you have the potential to build relationships, become a great networker, become a really effective people person, and build strong dynamics, motivate and engage people? Do you have the potential to acquire new skills that you're learning? It could be learning how to use a new system or coding in a new language. All of this is coming back to the original question of, you have great potential. When we look at it in terms of the skills shortage, it's, do you have the potential to learn the skills? If you don't have them today, could you learn them if you were provided with the training? Do you have the potential to learn really quickly? Because that will help you pick up information, even if it's in an area maybe you haven't worked in. Maybe you've moved to a different industry and you need to apply yourself in a completely different environment. If the nature of your job is changing, or you want to change and sidestep or move into a different area, how do you do this? So by measuring things like people's potential to learn, to adapt to new information, we can tap into talent pools and individuals that you may not have considered previously.
It's going to be interesting for a lot of people to learn that that's something you can actually assess as well, Jason. I imagine if we had this conversation 10, 15 years ago, there would be a lot of people that would say, but how can I possibly assess someone's potential to do something in the future that I'm not aware of yet?
Yes, and it's exactly where occupational psychologists have been creating measurement tools to tap into some of these characteristics. So if you met somebody and you're interviewing them, you can get a sense of how personable they are. You can ask some competency questions to get a good idea about how they might approach their work or how they structure things. That's still a really, really useful method. But what occupational psychologists are trying to bring into the mix in hiring is tap into the things that are a little bit harder to reveal in an interview, and sometimes that a candidate themselves might not realize they have a strength in. So across the whole area of data and data points we can look at when hiring, psychological characteristics are excellent predictors. So how quickly you learn, how you deal with change, how you build relationships, they've been shown to be fantastic predictors of future job success. Things like promotion rates, productivity in a role, and people's happiness and well-being in a role. So as you'll see on the screen here, you can measure a couple of different aspects of a person's psychology. It could be their aptitudes. So do you have a high aptitude for numerical reasoning? You're great with numbers. You can do calculations in your mind really quickly. That can be really useful for roles like accountancy, finance roles, architectural roles, analytical roles. Things like how you adapt to change can come from your personality. Are you open to new ideas? Are you comfortable with ambiguity in your environment? If you're looking at how someone builds relationships and approaches their communication style, measuring their behavioral preferences can help. And if it's new skills, again, a mixture and a combination. And what occupational psychologists are spending a lot of time doing is, how can we quickly and accurately measure some of these areas so that they can get built into recruitment processes? So you can look at a group of candidates and think, right, I'm really feeling the pain here of I either don't have enough candidates, or the candidates I do have don't have the right skills, or both. But do they actually have the potential? So if you had a small candidate population and you're thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill this position, if you're not measuring this information, you might lose people that have the potential to be a real superstar in your business, but you wouldn't know it because you don't know that they've got great learning speed. You don't know that they've got a really adaptable mindset. And I'm going to show something which is the only mild statistics. This is a summary of two very famous studies, one from the 90s, one from the mid-noughties, looking at the relationships, sort of correlations between different hiring methods and future job success and performance in a role. So your handwriting has absolutely no relationship to your ability to do well at work. It's a relief for doctors around the world that may have extremely fast handwriting that can be very difficult to read afterwards. But the next area is that your previous experience doesn't entirely relate to your future success. So obviously, if you have been very successful in your career and have performed really well in previous roles, that is going to have a relationship with how you perform in the future. But the factors that actually have some of the strongest relationship with job performance and job success are your personality and behavioral traits and your cognitive aptitudes. And one of the other areas we've called out here are structured interviews. So this is a tool that most companies are using. You have competency-based interviews, you have standardized scoring of how someone performs. That is a really strong anchor. If you're then adding in some psychological characteristics about the candidates that you're considering, you've got a really powerful set of insights to make. First of all, really objective decisions. Secondly, really fair decisions, because personality, behavioral traits, aptitudes are evenly distributed among different protected groups and characteristics if the assessments are designed well. So you can level a playing field from a diversity and inclusion perspective, whilst also adding more objectivity into the process. And what you're tapping into is by looking at areas like personality, behavior, and aptitude. What you're actually getting insight about is how these people learn, deal with change, build relationships, and acquire new skills. And you may look at candidates differently. You may only have 5 candidates when you wished you had 20. You may be looking at 20 candidates, but you wish they had skills that they currently don't have. But if they have the potential to learn quickly, adapt to change, they're going to be very personable, they can acquire new skills, and a range of other aspects. If you bring them in, you're still stacking the odds in your favor, because if you have the ability to put some of the preconceptions you may have to one side and take a chance on somebody that's got really high potential, but perhaps not the traditional skills and background, you may find someone that's absolutely amazing that you wouldn't have considered previously.
That's really interesting, and it's interesting you say as well that most companies do. I know the company I work for, we have a competency framework that then filters into our recruitment. So you have a framework of knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are then supposed to align to the objectives of your business. Most companies are already there, so then adding the psychological science factor on top of that is what's then going to really give you that edge in terms of
it's the difference that will make the difference.
That's really interesting. It also be really interesting to bring in the poll results just quickly. Remember, we asked what's the most pressing issue our audience are facing in their organization right now. 43% are saying a low volume of candidates. 34%, just over a third, saying candidates lacking the skills we need. And I'm assuming the we need is based off some form of competency assessment framework that they're doing. 16%, saying losing people midway through the process. I know that's something we might touch on later on. Just 3% talking about the difficulty of managing high volumes, which is fascinating. I mean, we talked about a global skills shortage at the start. It seems to be that it's a low volume of candidates that's the problem rather than a high volume, with 2% saying that it's something else. And we'll have a look at the questions and see what people have put in shortly. But Jason, 44% talking about low volume of candidates and 33% saying that these candidates lack the skills that they're looking for.
It's exactly the point that you're going to hear even more about in today's talk, that if you don't have the candidate volumes that you're hoping for, and then within that they're not having the skills that you need, that's where you have to look at their potential to pick up new information, learn new skills, and adapt and change, because you will widen the talent pool by doing that. So for the 44% of people that said they have a low volume of candidates overall, that can be a real pain and a real challenge. I've experienced it myself when hiring, and that is where you have to then consider, if the perfect candidate is not available in the market, or they don't have the exact skills I need, if I brought this person into my business, how long do I think it would take for them to acquire the skills to get to the level that I want? And you have to start considering, is this actually more of a learning and development challenge alongside recruitment? Do you have the learning and development capacity and ability to bring in high potential candidates that may be lacking certain skills? So that low volume, you may say, maybe there's only 10 people, you wanted 100. But maybe in that 10, you've got a few people with high potential to learn really quickly. And that could be an opportunity to fill some of those gaps with people you wouldn't have considered traditionally. That's where getting some of this insight can really help. And it's pretty easy to do so. There's so much fantastic software that's being created now to help people understand this information. So often when we talk about psychology, people, but how would I know? How would I know who's got high potential? And this is where, at Thomas International, obviously, this is what we're trying to make simple and easy for people to use. So here's a great visual of how this sort of information is presented in different parts of our software, where you can identify what is really important for a role, not in terms of raw skills, but in terms of psychological characteristics. Do you need somebody who is able to make quick decisions, is very innovative in their approach, but also has an eye for detail and is very process oriented? So creative, but within a parameter. If that is what you need to be successful, you're tapping into some of the psychological, what makes the difference. And that is where you can then match candidates and see who has a really good fit with these requirements. If someone has a really good fit with those requirements, it's likely they've got high potential to perform well in that role. You may look at somebody that has a 5 out of 5 star fit for a particular role and go, they've never worked in this industry before. They don't have some of the skills I would expect from a candidate. And I would strongly recommend bring them forward, bring them to interview, learn more about them, because you may find that they've got all the raw materials to be really successful, but you may have disregarded them in the past because they don't have the classic skills that you're looking for.
I just wanted to ask Jason, I note that you've used the word characteristics there rather than competencies. Does this mean that recruitment needs to sort of reframe slightly what they look for first up when they're thinking about hiring for a role?
The two are really related to one another. So the characteristics are more about the kind of innate aspects of a person. So are you someone that is very decisive, or do you like to consider all of your options before making a choice? So those characteristics help then relate to competencies you may be measuring in your business. So for example, you may have a competency around makes quick decisions under pressure because you want someone to constantly be making decisions and not getting slowed down or stuck. If someone has a characteristic of being quite decisive, it will relate to that competency. So quite often what we see when we work with clients is that individuals that score highly on the characteristics they say are important from a psychological point of view, those people end up being the ones that are performing well at work, whether it's on measures of competency performance or other hard metrics like sales performance or productivity, for example.
No, that's really interesting. It's fascinating to look at how you can bring in psychological factors into this, and actually how you're saying they are the game changer in terms of predicting success in a role. I want to go back to the audience again and ask another poll question. So we've and I know we talked about this in the week because I'm sure that there's going to be a sort of a weighted in one direction here, but we basically want to know from you, our audience, have you ever been rejected for a position based on a lack of experience, where you believe that your skills were a match or that you could learn the required skills quickly? We're just going to launch that poll now. Jason, when we talked about this week, we felt that there might be an overwhelming slant towards one of the options here. It can be quite a common experience, can't it, for a lot of people, whatever industry they're in.
Yeah, it's something that quite often sometimes people think, if only I'd been given a chance, or if you just brought me into that organization, if I'd been in the environment, I feel like I would have been able to pick up new information. I could have learned if only. And it's a real challenge because if you're a hiring manager, you have to find a balance. So there is work to be done. There are projects to be delivered. There are things that need to be focused on and progressed. So at times you may really be crying out for somebody that has previous experience, that has some tried and tested experience they can bring, because you may not have the time or capacity to train somebody that needs it. That's always going to be the caveat here. There is an element of, do you actually have the resources to train somebody that's high potential but doesn't have the skills? But I think that, and what I hope people will take away from this is that it is worth the time and the investment to do so. Because some of these high potential individuals are not traditional people you would expect, but they really do outperform the average. And as we can see from the poll here, solid 87% so far are saying yes. So if the majority of people listening to this talk right now are saying that they feel as though they didn't get an opportunity that they really think they could have succeeded in if only they were given the opportunity, the question to you is, are you doing the same in your hiring? Are you looking at candidates that you would initially go, oh, maybe not, and perhaps taking a second glance thinking, but what if? Do they have the potential? Are they just like you, where they could do exceptionally well, but they're lacking a certain element of experience that you would expect? And if you don't have some of the insight that you can get from psychological science to help you, how would you know? So I'm fascinated by that response. And I think that the takeaway is, if you have felt like this, look at some of the candidate pools you have today if you're currently hiring, or when you have your next hiring cycle, and look at some of the candidates that you may not have traditionally taken forward, and ask yourself the question, do you think, though, if they had a little bit of training, or if they were exposed to your work environment, could they be brilliant?
No, I think that's a really important question for everyone listening to ask as we go through this. Jos, I want to bring you in here as well. I think it's time we talked about creatment, and before we get going, just tell us a little bit about creatment and how you came to found the business, and how you got there, that journey, and then a little bit about what you do.
Okay, thank you. Before I get into that, I want to tell Jason that I absolutely love his story. I completely believe in it, and I think he should work for Createment one of these days. This is exactly what we do.
We'll have a conversation after the webinar.
Yeah, he's preaching to the choir there.
Always a pleasure to bring people together.
Yeah, well, also some interesting the polls that I want to circle back to after this.
Sure.
Let me first start with Createment. We founded Createment a little over 7 years ago. With the firm belief that's actually the foundation or the fundament of our company, is that if you really put your mind to something, you can achieve almost anything you want. And I have to add a little something to it. If you really put your mind to something, if you're passionate about something, you follow your passion, and you have some natural abilities, if you're gifted for this, then sky is the limit, actually. This is something that I think learned in my basketball career, because if there's
I was gonna ask, because that's obviously from an elite sport background, that must have been a message that came through to you from quite a young age.
Yeah, I think so, because I was basically brought up in the locker room, and you can never reach the highest level if you do not have passion and you want to go all out for to reach your goals. And at the same time, that's also something I learned there, is that you're basically the results from last year or last season do not say anything or less about what's coming next. So that's the fundament of Createment. And with this, we basically help our clients in their quest, in their search for digital talent. See, looking at the title of this webinar, I do not have to explain what the situation of the labor market is at the moment. I think everybody runs into the same problems. And one of the interesting things that came out of the poll is low volume of candidates. That's something we hear from.
Yeah, that was really interesting, isn't it? It's low volume and a lack of the skills that they're looking for as well.
Yes, and that's something I wanted to jump in right away, but I didn't want to cut into Jason's very interesting story. But what would happen? A question here, but I'm going to show this through a business case a little later. If you let go of the skill set you're looking at, so the lacking of skills, I think it was 33% and 43% low volume. What you see is, if you let go of the skill set, the low volume will increase. So it's something normally, of course, but it's a situation we all keep in place, so to say. If you ask me. But to go back to Createment, like I said, we started it seven years ago, a little over 7 years ago, helping our clients with their search for digital talent by only focusing on passion and potential. And so we're active in the IT area, the field of IT professionals, and we only focus with our methodology on people without this background. So without the resume, the study, or the relevant working experience.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So if we're letting go of the skills and if we're just looking at passion and potential, give us an idea of what that recruitment process looks like.
Well, the first thing is, and this is something that because Jason was talking about potential, I totally agree with him, totally. But there's one thing before, I think, and that's passion. You need to have passion for this, and this is where we start in our procedure. So, for example, and I maybe you can like we can look at the slide yet of the business case, and I go by the numbers to make it clear right away. Transavia is, I think most people will know, is a Dutch airliner. It's a daughter company of the Royal Dutch Airlines, KLM.
Yeah.
And they asked us last summer if we could help them out filling some of the vacancies, because what they were experiencing, if they would have some vacancies, well, low volume of candidates, sometimes even close to zero. So what we do in the middle of the process, we just start posting vacancies. We do everything through social campaigns. We have no recruiters or headhunters. Everything we do is through social. So Indeed, Facebook, LinkedIn, stuff like that. And by doing this, only people that have passion for IT, that are really intrinsically motivated, come to us and say, hey, I want to try out a traineeship like that. I want to make this career switch into IT. And that makes me go to the first box right there. The first number says 584. Those are the applicants for this IT traineeship at Transavia over a period of 3 months' time. So
that's we saw in the poll, companies experiencing low volume of candidates. That's a pretty high volume.
And I have to admit right away, this is extreme high volume also for our standards. Usually for every project we do, over 100 applicants per month apply for the project. This is very high, but 584. Every time I see this number, I still have to try to wrap my own head around it. But this shows you how many hidden talent is out there. How many people have passion for a completely different job than they once studied for or they're working at the present time. So it opens up a new pool of talent, ambitious people. And that's what I wanted to say with the results of the poll. If you let go of the skills, you see that there's high volume in potential, I have to say. All right. So this is the first step of our procedure: finding people that have passion for the job. Then we go to the next one, and this is very important because, all right, having passion for something is one thing, but then you have to know, how do you know that somebody has the right skill set, or not the skill set, potential? That if somebody's capable of developing into a certain role in a very short period of time. Because I know also, I've also been on the other side of the business. I'm willing to invest in people, obviously, but there has to be results, and quick. That's all. It's always a trade-off, like Jason said. You want to invest, yes, but you need results right away. Okay, so but if you, and this is that's why I like, Jason, your takeaway. You said they could be brilliant if you're willing to invest in somebody that you might not have on your A list right away. They could be brilliant, and I'll show you some examples after this. There's a lot of these examples that are brilliant. If you take this approach, and there it goes, you have to do the right testing. And this is a good thing. It's not like a glass bowl. It's not a shot in the dark. You can test it. That's the good thing about this. So how do we do this? So I
was going to say, you've had a lot of success with this. So I know we talked in the week in terms of the IT roles that you've placed. You had a 97% success rate. What are the sort of you go through this testing process? What are the key traits that you look at through this process?
Basically, there's 4 things we test, and I will not go into the testing procedure very deep, because that will take another webinar, I guess. But we developed our own technical assessment, and a part of this is the GIA, the General Intelligence Assessment of Thomas International. That really helps us in this procedure. But we test for analytical skills, adaptability, learning ability, and problem-solving ability. And the most important part are adaptability and learning ability, which also adds to Jason's story, I think. Also, for people that already are in a certain role, if you look at the development of these roles towards the future, where we don't really know where it's going, but you need to be able to adapt very quickly and learn very quickly. So those are the 2.
No, and I was just going to say, Jason, because we talked about potential earlier, what Jos is saying there is it's not just learning ability, but adaptability as well. So it's not just about potential, but it's about how quickly that potential can be realized as well, right?
Yeah, so this is where it all starts to mix together, because you want someone with great learning potential, but then if they are quite rigid in their approach and not very adaptable to different situations, would they? So you could have someone that could learn new information really quickly, but they have never worked in an IT type role previously, so they would never consider it, and they may struggle to adapt in that environment, which is where it's a really important part of the mix to go, does this person have great potential to learn? And are they quite open to change? Because that's where you start getting the kind of magic dynamic of great learning potential. And if they moved into a non-traditional environment, or if they haven't got the experience, they'll be able to cope with the uncertainty whilst they gain that experience. Because when you start a new job, it is a bit nerve-wracking. You don't really know what to do in the first couple of days. You're meeting a few people, you're learning a bit about the company, and you feel a bit like you're not really adding a huge amount of value right away. If you were doing that in a totally new industry that you wanted to step into, but you felt like you had a huge learning requirement, that can be quite challenging for people. But if that individual is quite adaptable, they'll take it in their stride and they'll thrive in the uncertainty and go, I can learn quickly. Yeah, I might not entirely know everything about this job, but I know that I'll be able to as soon as someone shows me. So if they're comfortable with ambiguity and they can learn quickly, it's a really powerful combination.
And Jos, we've talked about now how we get from the 584 to the 42. What were then the common traits of the people that got from the 42 to the 16 that you ended up hiring?
See, that's where you take the second step, actually, basically, in our approach, and what Jason also talked about. The 42 are the people that on like a cognitive level that we know for a fact that they're capable of doing this. And with doing this, I mean developing into, for example, a software developer in a short period of time. But then the next step comes, and this might be even as important as the first one. And this is also something I think I brought with me from my sporting backgrounds. If you look at winning teams, winning organizations, they have a couple of things in common. All the people there have like a cultural fit. You have to have a cultural fit with the organization, and also like what Jason was talking about, a characteristical fit with the profile. So out of the 42, in this case, that we presented to Transavia, they started to interview these candidates on these two areas, whether they fit with the company culture and whether there was a fit with the profile and the personality they had. And I think this is also a huge part of success, because, and out of the 42, 16 people they hired for this traineeship.
Brilliant.
So where you, and now if you rewind, where you can start, in this case with Transavia, in a situation where they can hardly find anybody, all you have to do is take a different approach at the market. You find a lot of people, you test them. That's a good thing about it. It's not just a leap of faith. You test this, and from there on, you can have discussions and only hire the people that fit your company profile and really fit the profile of the job they have to fulfill.
And we've got three of those people on the screen now, Jos. And I have to say, I think these three really bring to life exactly what you're saying. These are great examples of the process that you've been through at Createment. Just talk us through these examples here and show how you can look at your recruitment differently.
Yeah, I love this. I love these three.
It's great. We talked about it in the week, and I've been thinking about it all week. I think these are fantastic stories.
Yeah, that's what makes our job so great, because we love like unlocking hidden potential, so to say. And just we'll start with the left. We have Iris. She used to be a dolphin trainer. The Dolphinarium. You probably never heard of it, but it's famous in the Netherlands, because she has like a background in biology, but she was working with dolphins.
Right.
Can you imagine ever having somebody apply for a job as a software engineer and get hired? No, but
it's fantastic.
Coming to our process and then talking to Transavia, they found out that she had some personality traits that really fit this profile. Very smart, and she's like in the middle of the process right now, and things are going even better than expected. But that's one thing. The other one, Bashar, which I personally also really, really like, because Bashar is from Syria, only in the Netherlands for 3 years. And very smart, had a good education back in Syria, but this resume is not worth anything in the Dutch labor market. So he was basically in a dead end street. Through
So
our approach,
this is someone that would not be hired using traditional recruitment methods, looking at experience, looking at a CV.
yes, no, well, no, not a high chance of getting hired. Also, so the same approach, and now he's working there as an application manager, as you can see. And the last one is probably might be one of my favorites, a classic ballet dancer that turned into an IT consultant. And the feedback we got from Transavia at that time is that if obviously he was very smart and capable of doing this, but if you have the perseverance and the dedication to become a classical ballet professional dancer, that's like a character trait that really helps you out. And you can really see this in the field of expertise he's working in right now. So what I really have to give credits to Transavia with this, because they really took, if you just look at this, the hiring manager, I think she had some questions when she hired this, internal questions when she hired these profiles. Yeah. She probably did. But yeah, you can really see that they gave the company like a quality impulse, so to say.
And is that something obviously you have an empathy with, given your background as an elite sportsman? You can see whether it's dolphin trainer, whether it's someone who's worked on a service desk to a high level, whether it's someone who's worked who's been a classical dancer, a classical ballet dancer. You, as an elite sportsman, you can identify that those require some key traits that could be applied in other places.
Obviously, yes. I mean, you have all you have to do is look past the first resume and see what's behind it, because everybody has their own unique personality. And whereas of the first impression, you might think there's no match because she didn't study IT, or she's not a Java developer. But if you look behind it and see the personality, the uniqueness of that she can bring to your company, it gives you it creates a whole new dimension.
And Jason, that ties in very, very nicely with that slide you showed us about the psychological factors that are predictors of future success, saying that experience, well, handwriting, thank goodness, was the lowest, but experience was pretty low. And what we're talking about here is aptitude, which these three candidates clearly showed in huge quantities.
And you're tapping into things that are valuable regardless of backgrounds. As you can see, such a diverse range of backgrounds here and experiences, yet they've been successful because they've got some characteristics that you might not have noticed or even thought about. If you saw someone applying for an IT consultant role and thought they spent years as a dancer, you'd go, why are you changing industry? People go, did he even have the skills? There's lots of questions that then suddenly get raised. But actually, if you're in the context, as many people listening have said, candidates don't have the skills and you've got low volumes, it might be an illusion, as Jos said, that actually the reason you have low volumes is because you've got very strict skill requirements, which will be necessary for certain types of roles. But I'd be fascinated to know, the people listening, have you brought people into the business that have these sorts of backgrounds? Because this is what hiring potential is. I haven't met a company like Creatment before that are literally doing what we would suggest in terms of hire for potential first so clearly, because it is this. And for the 87% of people that said that they feel they've been rejected when they know that they could have learnt the skills or already had them if only had been given a chance. There are so many people like this out there that you may not have considered or might not even apply in the first place, that if only you were measuring something that's a bit more universal, like learning speed, problem solving ability, adaptability, that narrow candidate pool and lack of skills suddenly becomes a lot less of a pain.
And you talked earlier, Jason, about the link between recruitment and learning and development as well. It seems on the surface, having had the discussion that we've had, that it would be much easier for an organization's learning and development to provide the skills training that people need, and rather than going and looking for that in the market, and instead, as Jos has done here with Creatment, hiring on aptitude and those other characteristics that we've discussed.
Yeah, the investment in both
communication between those two departments seems to be the key as well.
It does, and I think that I can't speak for every company in the world, but quite often you hear that hiring budgets kind of stay the same because you need to get the people in, filling the seats. But L&D budgets can often be the ones that are kind of considered or restricted when times are harder, like we've had through the pandemic. But I think what we've seen, especially in the last 2 years, is first of all, the value of retaining people that are already in your business that are knowledgeable and talented. That's an L&D. That's an L&D case, and also then the onboarding, training, and upskilling of people that may have the right potential but don't have the traditional skills. I think the dynamic between recruitment-oriented talent management and development-oriented talent management need to continue coming together and working together, because I think the pathway through some of the bigger macro changes that we're all experiencing in the employment world at the moment are bringing recruitment and L&D closer together, measure potential, because if you can find people with great potential but maybe not traditional skills, it will give you a competitive edge. Imagine competitors, airlines all around the world. Which airlines that are currently trying to get back on their feet and expand as travel reopens are looking at previous dolphin trainers and classical ballet dancers as part of the mix. So it's going to give people an advantage. I think it's just for people listening, it's building that case to say that actually we need investment in recruitment to help us find people. But if you broaden the range of people you're willing to consider, having that good L&D capability is going to really help you make the most of high potential candidates. That, I think, is the solution to getting through the skills gap and crisis that people are experiencing at the moment.
We're going to set aside the last 10 minutes to answer audience questions. So if you'd like to ask a question to Jos or to Jason, please do pop that, click on the ask a question tab, type your question in, and I will put the best of those to them in the last 10 minutes or so. Before we do that, I know that you both wanted to just go over some key takeaways from this. And Jos, I guess starting with you, it's the idea that you first talked about, which is forgetting those preconceived ideas you have about the talent pool that you want to look at.
Yeah, I think the last slide shows this, and what I want to add to Jason's remarks just before, by forgetting the preconceived ideas about this, you open up the potential. So by not doing this, you're not doing yourself a favor, so to say. So if you're hiring, just please let go, and completely new world of talent will open up. So highly recommend it.
Jason, we covered earlier past experience not being a great predictor of future success, and that potential to learn is critical. Just talk us through how anyone listening today might start a conversation with Thomas International or with somebody else about how they start to change their recruitment process to look at that rather than looking at past experience.
Quite often you don't need to make massive changes to your hiring process. So sometimes one of the points can be, do we have to completely refactor our hiring? The answer is no. Quite often the earlier that you can get some sort of psychological insight into a process, the better. Even some indicator of someone's learning style or personality style is really, really valuable. So obviously after the webinar today, there's going to be lots of follow-up information sent for people to get in touch with people at Thomas if they'd like to know more about the practicalities. But the way that this can often look is that you have software that can either integrate into a system that you're currently using, or you can use it as part of a standalone experience to say you've got a initial list of candidates, or maybe you have a short list, maybe you have a small population of candidates, and you want to put a couple of people through some sort of psychological assessment. It gives you that insight, and it can be useful at any stage of the process. So we often say the sooner the better. The sooner you have the insight, obviously the better decisions you can make earlier on. But often then people may use it when they've got a short list. I would strongly recommend the sooner the better, though, because if you are trying to ensure that you capture non-traditional candidates with high potential, if it's one of the earlier bits of information that you're capturing, you're less likely to drop someone from a process that could be amazing, but you may not have considered traditionally.
Can I add to this? Can I add to this real quick? Because the experience we have once we're talking to our clients that want to go through this process is also that the people are hiring by doing this and by looking at those tests, psychological tests. They are this is the feedback that we get. They really have to focus in on, all right, what do we need? What are we looking for? Because in a normal way, they tend to fall into the trap of just, people come in hiring, the pressure of hiring people. All right, it might not be a good fit, but just hire them anyway. So it also gives a little bit more, how do I put this? Well, focus on the profile that you really want to get into your company.
And Jos, I wanted to give you the opportunity just before we move into questions. It was a question I wanted to ask. You obviously had a huge amount of success in IT specific roles, IT recruitment, but I'm assuming you believe this is an approach that can work across lots of other industries as well.
Yes, absolutely. The reason why we're into IT is because we developed our own testing methodology where we test for the ability to learn and to adapt into digital skills.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer that what I said at the beginning of the webinar, that if you follow your passion, anything is possible. So yes, I think you can use this approach over the whole axis.
Now, you both won't be surprised to learn that we've got lots of questions coming in on this topic. There's a few ones. There's a few. I'm just going through here. There's a few ones here, Jason, that I think are really interesting. Firstly, asking about your views on neurodiverse candidates and how your sort of psychological factors and your model applies to that. That's often, I've talked about it here on Inside HR. We've talked about it in across HRreview about how that is a neglected pool of talent in this country, and I'm sure in across the world.
It is.
What are your views around that untapped talent pool of neurodiverse? And we're talking about autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, but often of whom have amazing aptitude for roles that is never ever tested.
It is, and there are some companies around the world focus specifically on helping people with characteristics like that get into roles, like software development, as an example. So there's kind of two angles to this question. One is that whenever you're using psychological assessments, you have to ensure that they are fair to use and don't disadvantage people with different characteristics or learning styles. So in the case of neurodiversity, there's often a question of making sure that candidates are able to comfortably and safely disclose that in a hiring process, because some psychological assessment methods might not be ideal. So for example, if someone had quite severe dyslexia, there could be certain verbal reasoning tasks that are a bit harder for them to do. So in that case, it falls into a best practice consideration of, is this the right thing to measure? But that's often where we advise to look at personality characteristics, because somebody could have neurodiverse traits and be highly adaptable and open to ideas and curious and willing to learn. So again, I think that adapting and accommodating, creating opportunities for neurodiverse candidates is a webinar in and of itself. But I think that if you take the principle that we spoke today of look for potential to succeed rather than background skills or experience, it's going to increase the odds of people with diverse characteristics getting opportunities. Because again, on topics of diversity more broadly, quite often people with diverse traits may not get opportunities in the first place because of those diverse characteristics. So again, if you are looking at things like ability to learn, passion, problem-solving capability, openness to change, you're going to find a more diverse candidate pool moving in as well, not just in terms of background, but also in terms of characteristics. So there's so much more I could say on that topic, but
yeah, no, and I know it's a webinar. As with a lot of these questions, we hit them in the last 10 minutes, and they could be an hour on their own. But there are a few questions coming in about diversity inclusion. And I think what you're saying there is that actually, if you apply this method correctly, this is something that will improve that rather than hamper candidates, whether they be neurodiverse or other aspects of diversity as well. Jos, there's quite a few questions coming in about whether you can apply the model that you've applied at Createment to more senior roles as well, to more senior management roles, where traditionally that's probably been an area where recruiters look most at experience and skill set rather than potential. Say whether it's difficult to talk about it in terms of age, but whether you're more experienced in your career, you're looking at senior management roles.
Yeah.
Is this something that would still work and a way you could look at that as well?
We've done it. Obviously, if you look at like the development roles, they seem to be a little easier to fill with our methodology. But we've also done it in this area because and actually the same thing applies. You look at people's unique skill set, like apart from from what they used to bring. But let me give you a quick example. Somebody that had a senior role in a completely different field of expertise, applied for a job as a senior in a senior role in the IT world. So he brought his leadership skills and everything with him, and all we had to do is teach him the specific skills for this role. So yes, to be short, yes, it's also possible. It also takes a little bit of different approach, but overall, it's the same mindset for this.
Jason, there's a great question that's come in about whether there's a cost-effective way that they could buy in something like this, a software that helps them do this for a company that only hires people who are changing career, which in itself is fascinating. I'd love to.
Yeah, that is.
They should be getting in touch with you and talking about this, because that sounds fascinating in itself. But this could really help a company like that, who really have obviously identified that they want to focus on aptitude rather than experience. Yeah. Is there something that they can put in place to help do that?
Yeah, it is. It's using some of the psychological assessment software that companies like us at Thomas International provide. Because what that example is highlighting, and it's similar to the theme of today's talk, is that when people make career changes, that is an opportunity to look for potential. You know, some of the areas where looking at potential rather than previous experience can help out people that have had a career break, people who have had a bout of long-term sickness, people that have been on maternity leave, people who have been in creative industries. You know, people could be athletes or in the performing arts, where their career in that area actually ends a lot younger than you would anticipate, and they need to transfer into something else. People that have been in the armed forces. There's many parts of the world where people sometimes have to make quite drastic career changes from what they've done previously, and they can hit a bit of a cliff because they don't have the experience that other candidates would have built up in the same time period, but they've got the potential to perform really well. So it is getting in touch with companies like us at Thomas to learn a little bit more, because we'll learn a little bit more about what your particular challenges and needs are, and see what the best thing to measure is, and have a really open, pretty fun conversation about how some of the psychological measures that we have can help you get some of that insight and help people that are making those sorts of career changes.
And for the person that asked that question as well, I would definitely direct them towards the attachments tab, where you can find out more about about the different tools that Thomas International offer, how you can get in touch with them, but also a couple of blogs there that I think would speak to exactly what you are asking. Really interesting question here that's come up about size of businesses as well. There's quite a few here. There's one here. Hello, have you ever had experience in this using this model in a very small company? This person works for a company they employ up to 100 people worldwide, where the company is fast changing, demanding and challenging, and where everyone in the company is very stretched with daily tasks and can't find enough time to teach newcomers without past experience. I see what they're saying here. So they're saying that because they're so stretched, it's difficult to give them that skills development, that learning and development that we talked about, Jason. For a company like that, small sort of employee base, less than 100 people, they're global, they're working worldwide. It's obviously a fast-paced industry that they're working in, where they worry that they could hire for potential, but they also need to have the skills development in place, which maybe they don't have. How would this fit for a company like that?
Oh, well, let me ask this question.
Go on, Jos, please.
Because when you said does it work for a small company, and then you came up with 100, that we work for big companies, big utility companies, finance institution, but also for small companies that employ 7 or 8 people.
Right.
The only thing is that you have to know that this takes an investment. People need you. You cannot expect people to bring them in from a different part of the labor market and plug and play and they go. So there has to be room.
And it sounds like that's their culture at the moment, doesn't it?
That's so. I would not recommend this approach.
Or any other. It requires some development as well, doesn't it?
It requires some development. The good thing about it is that this period is not that long, and especially if you take a different approach of how you set your teams up. And we're living in an agile world where people can really, in a very fast way, pick up little parts, contribute to the team's overall success. So I don't think this hump is as big as a lot of people think, but at the same time, there needs to be, and we call this like a learning environment.
I think we've got time for one last one, and it's an interesting one. Would you, and this is for both of you, would you adapt this same principle of hiring for potential to your internal development and promotion as well? So your internal recruitment. Jason, if you at Thomas International, is that something that you focus on as well as external recruitment?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Because the principles are the same. If you're looking for someone to learn quickly, to adapt to change in others, we actually have a specific assessment that looks at leadership potential itself. So looking at the personality characteristics that relate to successful leadership, because traditionally the traits that get people into leadership positions aren't always the traits that make you good at it once you're there. But the principle is the same. So if you had an opportunity for a more senior management position, and you thought there's no obvious successors in the business, you may start searching externally. But what if there were internal candidates that you just weren't aware that they had the potential to step up? Because I'm sure everyone listening at some point can think about when they got their break, the company that hired them in and they built their career there, or the manager that gave them more opportunities than they'd had before. And so taking this principle and applying it to internal promotion and succession planning can have really similar results, because ultimately what you're doing is trying to say, before I look external, is there anybody internal that I may not have realized has the potential to really succeed if they're promoted?
And perhaps we gave them a different function of their business as well, maybe moving out of an operations role into something totally different, or vice versa.
There's one of my colleagues who's an absolute superstar. Started her career working in a kind of general customer support type role with clients, moved into a product type role, moved into a sales operational type role, and now heads up a large part of our customer success function globally. So she's taken the skills from multiple different experiences and then risen up throughout the business, linking it all together. And on paper, you may think, from product to sales operations, now into customer success, but has brought those central skills of what I believe has made her really successful, because people have looked at her potential to succeed rather than individual parts of her experience. And then when you take a bird's eye view of it, you go, actually, all of this experience really complements. So absolutely, if you're hiring new people fresh, it's a great way. If you're looking at internal candidates, take the same principles. There are people that you haven't met yet in your company and people that are already there that do have the potential to do more than they're doing today. You just need to put some of those preconceptions to one side and try and measure something that maybe you're not measuring today.
Jos, Jason, thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm sorry our hour is up. There were a load of questions we didn't get to as well. And for those of you that did ask questions that we didn't answer, my apologies for that. I would direct you towards those attachments, because I think there'll be quite a lot of the answers in there. There was a great question that I never got to, that I had my eye on through the last 10 minutes, about how to pitch for buy-in to change your recruitment process. Please do go into those attachments and have a look at that. Inside HR is back next week. We're at a slightly different time of 2 p.m. GMT, when we're going to be talking about talent acquisition in a competitive market again, with our partners at iCIMS. We're going to be joined by Christy Spilker, who's the Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition at iCIMS. So please do join us for that. In the meantime, thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in this morning to listen to us, and for everyone at Inside HR, goodbye.